The air in Bay 47 tasted of scorched metal and sterilized blood. Jalen wiped the sweat from his brow with a sleeve, already stained with engine grease and plasma residue, leaving a fresh smudge across his forehead. The orbital repair bay's lights flickered, humming with the ancient power that kept the aging battleship Eris functioning decades past its decommission date. 2 more welds, Jalen muttered to himself, checking the chronometer embedded in his left wrist. Just 2 more, then I can clock out. 27 standard days until shore leave. Not that he was counting. The plasma torch in his hand sputtered, and he tapped it against his thigh armor, a habit that drove the quartermaster insane, but always seemed to work. The blue flame stabilized, casting eerie shadows across the cramped bay, filled with damaged armor plates, waiting for repair. Level 2 armortechs like Jalen weren't supposed to service anything beyond standard infantry gear. But with the recent border skirmishes, even the specialized techs had been reassigned to the front lines. Jalen didn't mind the extra work. It kept his mind occupied and away from the whispered politics that consumed the mess hall conversations. Border disputes, succession crises, and rumors of exiled royalty weren't his concern. Fix the armor, collect the credits, count down to shore leave. That was his mantra. The bay doors hissed open behind him, and Commander Varick's gravelly voice echoed against the metal walls. Bay 47, status report. Without turning, Jalen responded with practiced indifference. Finishing up the last infantry plates now, Commander. Should be cleared by 2300 hours. New priority assignment, Varick said, his obsidian armor reflecting the plasma torch's glow. Silver breastplate, chamber designation 81138. Damage classification, severe, required by Zoro 600 tomorrow. Jalen finally turned, frowning. Silver. We don't have silver armor in the infantry registry. The commander's face remained impassive beneath his transparent visor. This isn't in any registry, Armatech, and it wasn't a request. With that, Varick dropped a small data chip onto Jalen's workbench and left, the bay doors sealing behind him with a pneumatic thud. Jalen sighed, extinguishing his torch. So much for clocking out on time. After finishing the infantry plates, rushing the final welds more than he'd like to admit, Jalen inserted the data chip into his workbench terminal. Encrypted schematics flashed across the screen, revealing a design unlike any standard-issue armor he'd encountered. The metal composition was listed simply as proprietary alloy NR73, and the damage reports indicated multiple fracture points along stress lines that shouldn't exist in properly manufactured armor. Curious, despite his exhaustion, Jalen gathered his tools and made his way to Chamber 81138, a section of the ship he'd never accessed before. The further he walked from the main repair bays, the more the corridor lighting shifted from utilitarian white to a subdued blue. The air changed too, carrying the faint scent of something organic, like crushed leaves or fresh soil, oddly out of place on a battleship. The chamber door was unmarked save for the alphanumeric designation, and when Jalen pressed his palm against the biometric scanner, he was surprised when it accepted his low-level clearance. The door slid open silently, revealing a space that bore little resemblance to the repair bays he knew. Instead of the standard metal workbenches and tool racks, this chamber was spacious, with curved walls that seemed to absorb sound. The lighting was indirect, emanating from bioluminescent strips that pulsed gently along the ceiling. In the center stood a single figure, motionless and silent. Jalen froze, not expecting anyone to be present. The figure was tall, taller than any human he'd ever seen, and clad in ornate armor that gleamed silver, despite the obvious damage marring its surface. The helmet was removed, revealing blue-tinted skin and eyes like clouded glass that regarded him without blinking. Jalen cleared his throat. I was assigned to repair damaged armor in this chamber. The figure remained silent, simply turning to present the cracked breastplate more fully to his view. Now, Jalen could see the damage clearly, a spiderweb of fractures radiating from what appeared to be impact points, consistent with energy weapon fire. These weren't training accidents or wear and tear. This armor had seen combat, recent and desperate. "I'll need you to remove the breastplate," Jalen said, slipping into the professional tone he used with infantry soldiers. "I can't work on it while you're wearing it." Still without speaking, the figure reached up with gloved hands and released a series of clasps hidden within the armor's ornate engravings. The breastplate separated with a soft hiss, not the mechanical click of standard-issue gear, but something almost organic, as if the armor itself had exhaled. Jalen approached cautiously, accepting the heavy piece with both hands. The metal was warm to the touch and seemed to vibrate faintly, almost like it was responding to his contact. Close up, he could see that what he had taken for decorative engravings were actually intricate circuits etched directly into the metal, some of them glowing faintly with internal energy. "This isn't standard issue," he said, unable to contain his professional curiosity. "I've never seen integration circuitry this complex." When the figure still didn't respond, he shrugged and carried the breastplate to a workstation that had risen silently from the chamber floor. "Should take about 3 hours, assuming the alloy accepts my plasma torch." As Jalen laid the armor on the workstation, the room's lighting adjusted automatically, focusing on his work area. He ran a diagnostic scanner over the damage, and the results confirmed his suspicion. This wasn't just armor. It was a living system. The fractures weren't just breaking points in metal. They were interruptions in complex energy pathways that somehow interfaced directly with the wearer's biology. "This is beyond my certification," Jalen muttered. But his hands were already selecting tools, his mind racing through adaptation possibilities. Standard repair protocols wouldn't work, but he'd been modifying tech since before joining the fleet. If he treated the armor more like a wounded organism than damaged equipment. 3 hours stretched into 4, as Jalen discovered that the armor seemed to resist certain repair attempts. The plasma torch would sometimes sputter when approaching particular circuits, and the metal would harden unpredictably under his tools. It was almost as if the armor was testing him, forcing him to adapt his techniques with each weld. "You're being stubborn," he found himself whispering to the breastplate, after a particularly difficult section refused to seal properly. "I'm trying to help you." "It prefers to be touched gently." The voice startled Jalen so badly, he nearly dropped his plasma cutter. It was the first time the armored figure had spoken, and the voice was unexpectedly melodic, each word precisely formed with an accent he couldn't place. "Excuse me?" The figure moved closer, watching Jalen's hands as they worked. "The armor. It responds to intention as much as technique. It senses your frustration." Jalen blinked, looking down at the silver breastplate. "You're saying it's sentient?" "Not independently, but it bonds with its wearer, becomes an extension." The figure's clouded glass eyes studied him. "You are skilled. Most technicians attempt to dominate it." Feeling oddly self-conscious, Jalen adjusted his approach, slowing his movements and lightening his touch on the tools. To his amazement, the metal seemed to soften slightly, the edges of the fractures drawing together more willingly. "That's not in any repair manual I've studied," he said, a smile tugging at his lips despite his exhaustion. "Few things of value are found in manuals." There might have been the ghost of a smile on the blue-tinted face, but it was gone too quickly to be certain. Working with this new understanding, Jalen made rapid progress. The circuits reconnected under his careful guidance, the metal flowing almost like liquid at times, before hardening into seamless connections. The damage that had looked catastrophic hours earlier was now barely visible, just faint lines that caught the light at certain angles. "Almost done," Jalen said, more to himself than his silent observer. "Just need to recalibrate the energy distribution so these pathways don't overload when—" The chamber door slid open, cutting him off mid-sentence. Commander Varric entered, followed by at least 20 soldiers in full combat gear. Their armor was not the standard gray of the fleet, but a deep blue with silver accents that matched the breastplate on Jalen's workbench. Before Jalen could speak, every soldier, including Commander Varric, dropped to one knee, heads bowed. Only then did Jalen realize they weren't looking at him, but at the tall figure beside him. "Rise," said the figure, the melodic voice now carrying an unmistakable note of command. The soldiers stood in perfect unison, and Commander Varric stepped forward. "Your Highness, the ship will reach the rendezvous point in 6 hours. The Imperial Envoy awaits your presence." "Your Highness?" Jalen's hands froze over the breastplate as realization dawned. He wasn't repairing just any armor. This was royal tech, which meant the tall, blue-skinned figure was... "I will be prepared, Commander." The figure, apparently some form of royalty, said. "The Armatech has performed admirably. The armor will be functional for the audience." Varric's gaze shifted to Jalen, eyes narrowing slightly. The technician was selected for his skills and his discretion. The emphasis on the last word was unmistakable. He will be returned to his regular duties immediately. "No." The single word cut through the chamber like a blade. "I require his assistance for the calibration phase. The integration circuits need programming that matches his repair technique." Commander Varric's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. "As you wish, Your Highness. I'll inform the quartermaster that Armatech Jalen has been reassigned temporarily." "Not temporarily, Commander. Indefinitely." The soldiers remained expressionless, but Jalen could feel the tension ripple through them. Whatever was happening here went far beyond a simple armor repair, and he had just been pulled into the center of it. After the commander and his soldiers departed, Jalen turned to the royal figure with wide eyes. "I think I'm missing some context here. Your Highness?" "My name is Saris," the figure said, reaching for the repaired breastplate. "And we have very little time." Saris reattached the breastplate with practiced movements. As the last clasp connected, the entire armor suit seemed to shudder slightly, the circuits glowing brighter for a moment, before settling into a steady, pulsing rhythm. "The calibration," Saris continued, "is not merely technical. The armor must recognize you as an ally, rather than simply a repair function. Otherwise, the security protocols will prevent what we must do next." "And what exactly is that?" Jalen asked, acutely aware that he was now apparently indefinitely reassigned to a member of some royal family he knew nothing about. "Save my people," Saris answered simply, "and possibly yours as well." Before Jalen could process this dramatic statement, Saris reached out and gripped his wrist with surprising strength. A compartment in the silver armor slid open, revealing a neural interface that glowed with the same bioluminescence as the chamber lighting. "Place your hand here," Saris instructed. "The armor will read your neural patterns and register you as authorized support personnel." Jalen hesitated, his repair tech training screaming warnings about interfacing with unknown technology. "Is this going to hurt?" "Only if you resist," Saris replied, and this time the ghost of a smile definitely lingered longer. With a deep breath, Jalen pressed his palm against the neural interface. Immediately, a sensation like cool liquid metal flowed up his arm. Not painful, but intensely strange, as if something was reading not just his thoughts, but the very structure of his mind. Images flashed behind his eyes. Star systems he didn't recognize. Vast, ring-shaped worlds suspended in space. Blue-skinned figures in silver armor standing before councils of beings from a dozen different species. Then, abruptly, scenes of destruction. Those same ring worlds fracturing. Cities burning. Silver-armored soldiers falling before waves of shadow-like entities that seemed to flicker in and out of physical reality. Just as suddenly as it began, the connection broke. Jalen stumbled backward, catching himself against the workstation. What was that?" "Memory imprint," Sarah said, the armor now glowing steadily with renewed energy. Necessary for what comes next. The armor recognizes you now, as do I. The clouded glass eyes studied him with new intensity. You are not what I expected, Jalen. I get that a lot, he replied weakly, still reeling from the mental download. Look, I'm a level 2 armortech. I fix infantry gear and patch hull breaches. Whatever you're involved in is already your concern. Saris interrupted. The memories you just saw? They're not just history, they're prologue. What destroyed my homeworld is coming for this sector, and this ship carries the only warning system capable of detecting their approach. And let me guess, it needs repair too? It needs activation, Saris corrected, by the rightful regent of the Nexus worlds. Which is why I've spent 3 cycles infiltrating this fleet to reach the ancient outpost embedded within this very ship. A ship your people salvaged without understanding its true purpose. Jalen ran a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. The Eris was salvaged from a derelict space station almost 50 years ago. You're saying it contains some kind of alien technology that your people left behind? Not left behind. Hidden. Until needed. Saris moved toward the chamber door. Come. Now that the armor is repaired and you are recognized by its systems, we can access the sealed sections. Against his better judgment. Jalen followed Saris from the chamber into corridors he'd never seen before. Passages that seemed to shift and change as they walked. The walls occasionally pulsing with the same bioluminescent patterns as the armor. The further they traveled, the less the ship resembled the Eris he knew. Standard metal bulkheads gave way to curved surfaces that seemed partially grown rather than constructed, and the air carried that same impossible scent of vegetation. This isn't part of the original ship, Jalen realized aloud. It's growing inside it? Living architecture, Saris confirmed without slowing. Designed to remain dormant until activated by royal presence. Your fleet has been carrying this seed for decades, never knowing it was slowly preparing itself. They reached what appeared to be a dead end, but when Saris pressed a hand against the wall, it rippled like water and parted to reveal a chamber unlike anything Jalen had ever seen. Vast and circular, its ceiling arched high overhead, covered entirely in the bioluminescent material that now revealed itself to be a complex network resembling neural pathways. The floor was transparent, showing not the vacuum of space below, but what appeared to be a self-contained ecosystem, a miniature jungle with plants that glowed with their own inner light. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, above which hovered a fractured sphere composed of interlocking rings that slowly rotated around each other. The memory node, Sarah said, approaching the pedestal. The last intact record of the Nexus worlds before their destruction. And this warning system you mentioned is activated through this. Saris gestured at the hovering sphere. When fully powered, it will project a quantum signal that penetrates phase space, detecting the shadow entities long before conventional sensors could find them. Jalen studied the rotating rings with professional interest. And I'm guessing those fractures are preventing it from functioning properly? Correct. The physical damage reflects corrupted data pathways. Saris turned to him. Your repair of my armor was not coincidence. Jalen, you were identified by ship systems as having the necessary neural pattern to assist with this restoration. Lucky me, Jalen muttered. But he was already examining the fractured components, his mind cataloging possible approaches. This was far beyond his training, but the basic principles weren't so different from the armor. Complex systems with integrated organic components, designed to function as a unified whole. We must work quickly, Sarah said, the melodic voice now urgent. The Imperial Envoy believes I am preparing for a formal audience to discuss potential alliance. If they discover my true purpose. What exactly is your true purpose? Jalen asked, looking up from the memory node. And while we're at it, who exactly are you, besides royalty of some kind? Saris was silent for a moment, the clouded glass eyes unreadable. I am the last sovereign of the Nexus worlds, exiled by my own council when I warned of the shadow threat, dismissed as delusional, stripped of authority, and sent to diplomatic isolation. The armor pulsed briefly with what Jalen somehow knew was suppressed anger. 3 cycles later, our homeworld was shattered. The survivors blamed me for failing to prevent what I had foreseen. But now you have proof, Jalen said, gesturing to the memory node. Data that will mean nothing without Imperial authentication. I must reclaim my title before the Council will act on the warning. Saris joined him at the pedestal. The node will help us repair the fractured rings. But first we must access the original design schematics. Over the next 2 hours, Jalen found himself in the strangest technical collaboration of his career. The memory node responded to their combined input, Saris providing authentication and historical context, while Jalen applied his repair expertise to the damaged components. The hovering rings would occasionally separate, revealing intricate mechanisms that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially elsewhere, as if certain components were merely projections of objects that existed in another dimension. As they worked, the transparent floor beneath them began to glow more intensely, the miniature jungle responding to their progress. Tendrils of bioluminescent energy occasionally rose from the ecosystem below, wrapping around the memory node like supportive hands. It's adaptive, Jalen realized, watching the living energy assist with a particularly difficult connection. The whole system is helping us repair it. All Nexus technology operates in symbiosis, Saris explained. The living components compensate for mechanical failures, and vice versa. It is why our civilization survived as long as it did against the shadows. Until it didn't, Jalen couldn't help pointing out. Until betrayal from within weakened us, Saris corrected, voice hardening. Those who feared change more than destruction? With the final connections restored, the fractured sphere began to spin more rapidly, the rings aligning in new configurations. Suddenly, the entire chamber darkened, and above them appeared a massive holographic projection, a ring-shaped world of breathtaking beauty, with silver cities built into mountain ranges that would have been impossible on a spherical planet. Oceans curved impossibly upward, held in place by artificial gravity fields that created waterfalls thousands of miles high. The first Nexus, Saris said softly, reaching up as if to touch the projection. My home. As they watched, the hologram shifted, showing the ring world from a different angle, now with dark, shifting patches spreading across its surface like infection. The silver cities flickered and went dark one by one, and great fractures appeared in the ring structure itself. Finally, in a silent cataclysm, the entire world shattered, fragments spinning away into the void while shadow forms drifted among the debris. The Council refused to believe they could breach our defenses, Saris said, voice barely audible. We had repelled them for 1,000 years. They grew complacent, diplomatic, attempted communication with entities that exist only to consume. The hologram shifted again, showing star charts and trajectory predictions, the shadow entities moving systematically through a spiral arm of the galaxy, approaching the sector containing both the former Nexus worlds and, Jalen realized with a chill, human-controlled space. If we don't warn them, Jalen began. Fascinating projection. Commander Varick's voice cut through the chamber as the door irised open. Though unauthorized access to sealed sections of this vessel constitutes a breach of security protocols. Jalen turned to see the commander flanked by his blue armored soldiers, weapons drawn, but not yet aimed directly at them. Behind them stood another figure, tall and robed in materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Imperial Envoy, Saris acknowledged, straightening to full height. I was preparing evidence for our audience. The robed figure stepped forward, hood shifting, to reveal a face similar to Saris's, but older, with patterns etched into the blue skin that glowed faintly. Evidence of what? Exile? Your continued obsession with shadows and conspiracies? The voice was similar in its melodic quality to Saris's, but carried a hardened edge of contempt. The High Magistrate was clear. You were stripped of authority precisely because of these delusions. Not delusions, Saris said, gesturing to the still hovering hologram of destruction. History, and soon, your future as well. Envoy, unless the warning is heeded. The Imperial Envoy's gaze shifted to Jalen, narrowing. And you've involved an outsider in royal matters. Another violation of your exile terms. The terms of my exile are irrelevant in the face of extinction, Saris replied. That's not for you to decide. The envoy made a subtle gesture, and the soldiers raised their weapons. Commander Varric, secure the chamber. The exile will return with me to face the High Magistrate's judgment for these violations. Varric hesitated, his obsidian armor reflecting the holographic destruction still playing above them. The projection. It matches intelligence reports from the outer colonies. Unexplained communications blackouts. Entire settlements going dark. Coincidence, the envoy snapped. Or perhaps manufactured evidence to support the exile's claims. Jalen looked between the Imperial Envoy and Saris, suddenly understanding the political dynamics at play. This wasn't just about a warning. It was about who would control the response to a crisis that some refused to acknowledge even existed. The memory node chose that moment to emit a high-pitched tone. The hologram flickered, then stabilized, but now showing real-time sensor data from somewhere at the edge of the system. Dark, shifting forms moving through space, leaving dead zones in their wake where stars simply vanished. They're already here, Saris breathed. Sooner than I calculated. The chamber light suddenly flashed red, and a mechanical voice echoed through the space. Security breach detected. Unknown biological entities approaching hull section 17A. Initiating containment protocols. Commander Varric activated his comm unit. Bridge, report. What's approaching the ship? The response came through garbled with static. Nothing on conventional sensors, but systems are malfunctioning across. Sectors going dark. Can't establish. The transmission cut off abruptly as the chamber doors slammed shut, sealing them all inside. The transparent floor beneath them darkened, the bioluminescent jungle retracting into protective shells as if sensing danger. The ship's security AI has detected phase space incursion, Saris explained rapidly. But it's an outdated system. It will attempt to quarantine rather than defend. The Imperial Envoy's composed facade cracked slightly. This is impossible. Our vessels in orbit would have detected any approach. Not if they move through phase space. Saris cut in. Which is precisely what I've been warning about for 3 cycles. The memory node is the only system capable of tracking them. Jalen felt the floor vibrate beneath his feet. Not to interrupt this political debate, but what exactly happens during containment protocols? As if in answer, sections of the chamber wall began to glow red, and small apertures opened, revealing defensive turrets that swivel to target everyone present. The AI cannot distinguish between shadow entities and organics once containment begins, Saris said grimly. It will attempt to neutralize all biological signatures within the quarantine zone. Meaning us, Jalen translated. We need to override the AI, Commander Varric stated. Practical military training apparently overriding political concerns in the face of immediate danger. Envoy, does your authorization level? The AI will only respond to royal command, the Imperial Envoy interrupted, turning to Saris with obvious reluctance. Which requires a recognized sovereign. Which I am not, Saris finished, until the High Magistrate reverses my exile. The defensive turrets powered up with an ominous hum. Okay, less talking, more escaping, Jalen suggested, eyeing the nearest turret. Is there another way out of this chamber? Saris nodded toward the transparent floor. Through the ecosystem level. The maintenance passages can take us to the Ascension Spire, where the Imperial audience was to be held. The High Magistrate awaits there with the full council. You expect us to trust you after this? The envoy demanded. A bolt of energy fired from one of the turrets, striking just inches from the envoy's feet. I expect you to prefer survival, Saris replied calmly. Commander, your soldiers should remain here to draw the AI's attention while we access the maintenance passages. Once we reach the High Magistrate and activate the Royal Override, all security systems will stand down. Varric gave a curt nod. A sound tactical approach, but I will accompany you with 2 of my best. The rest will create a diversion. The floor beneath them suddenly liquefied, becoming a swirling portal that revealed the glowing jungle below. Without waiting for further discussion, Saris stepped directly into it, disappearing from view. The Imperial envoy followed with visible reluctance. Jalen looked at Commander Varric, who gestured impatiently toward the portal. After you, Armatech. Not how I expected my shift to end, Jalen muttered, and stepped into the swirling liquid floor. The sensation was like falling through cool gel, slowing his descent until he landed gently on a surface that felt like living moss. The bioluminescent plants around him pulsed with agitated energy, clearly responding to the security threat above. Saris and the envoy stood a few feet away, arguing in low, urgent tones while scanning the dense vegetation for a path forward. Commander Varric and 2 blue-armored soldiers landed beside Jalen moments later, weapons ready. Above them, the portal solidified once more, muffling the sound of energy weapons firing as the remaining soldiers engaged the defense turrets. This way, Saris called, already moving through the glowing foliage. The maintenance passage is key to royal biosignatures. It will open for me. They followed in tense silence, the jungle closing behind them as they passed. Jalen noticed that the plants seemed to lean toward Saris, while drawing away from the Imperial envoy. Subtle movements, but consistent enough to be deliberate. The ecosystem recognizes authentic royal lineage, the envoy noted acidly, noticing the same phenomenon. How convenient for your claims, exile. Living systems cannot be deceived like politicians. Envoy, Saris replied without turning. They respond to genetic truth, not political declarations. They reached what appeared to be a solid wall of intertwined bioluminescent vines. Saris pressed a hand against them, and they immediately parted, revealing a narrow passage that glowed with the same blue light as the armor circuits. Maintenance access to the Ascension Spire, Saris explained. Designed as an emergency escape route for royalty, it will bypass most of the security systems. Most? Jalen questioned, not liking the qualifier. The passage is protected by guardians, Saris admitted. Biosynthetic entities programmed to allow only royal bloodlines and their designated protectors. Which we are not, the envoy pointed out. You are of royal blood, though lesser lineage, Saris countered. And I have designated the commander and his soldiers as protectors through my armor's recognition protocols. Those clouded glass eyes turned to Jalen. As for you, the memory node marked you as technical support. The Guardians should recognize all designations. Should, Jalen repeated. The system has been dormant for 50 years, Saris reminded him. Some protocols may have degraded. With no better options, they entered the narrow passage, which sealed behind them immediately. The walls pulsed with flowing patterns of light that seemed to be carrying data, monitoring their progress. Jalen suspected, and reporting to whatever Guardians lay ahead. They had walked for perhaps 10 minutes when the passage widened into a circular chamber with 7 identical exits. In the center stood a pillar of swirling light that occasionally coalesced into almost recognizable shapes before dissolving again. A junction node, Saris explained. It will scan us before permitting passage to the next section. The swirling light suddenly expanded, enveloping each of them in separate columns of gently rotating illumination. Jalen felt the same sensation he had experienced when connecting to the armor, a scanning of not just his physical form, but something deeper, more essential. One by one, the light columns turned green and retracted, first from Saras, then from Commander Varric and his soldiers, then from the Imperial envoy. When only Jalen remained engulfed, a soft chime sounded, and a mechanical voice spoke in a language he didn't understand. Saras responded in the same language, apparently arguing with the system. After a tense exchange, the light around Jalen finally turned green and retracted. "Problem?" he asked, trying to sound calmer than he felt. "The system found no historical record of your genetic pattern," Saras explained. "I had to override with royal authorization. It has designated you as unanticipated auxiliary, essentially acknowledging that your presence was not planned, but is accepted under my authority." "That's reassuring," Jalen said dryly. "It gets us through," Commander Varric pointed out. "Which path leads to the Ascension Spire?" Saras approached one of the 7 exits, which dilated open at proximity. "This one. But be warned, the Guardians will still challenge us, royal authorization or not. They operate on their own protocols." The new passage was wider but darker, the bioluminescence reduced to a faint outline along the floor and ceiling. They moved in silence, weapons ready, the tension growing with each step. Jalen found himself instinctively checking the walls for repair panels or maintenance access, anything that might give him some control in this alien environment. They had nearly reached another junction when a section of the wall suddenly rippled and solidified into a humanoid figure. If humans were 3 meters tall with limbs that bent in too many places. Its surface remained the same bioluminescent material as the passage, making it appear as if the corridor itself had decided to stand up and block their path. "Guardian," Saras confirmed quietly. "Stay still and let me handle this." The Guardian tilted its featureless head, studying them with senses Jalen couldn't begin to comprehend. When it spoke, the sound seemed to come from the walls around them, rather than the figure itself. A resonant hum that formed words, just at the edge of comprehension. Saras again responded in that unknown language, gesturing to each member of their group in turn. The Guardian remained motionless throughout the exchange, until Saras pointed to Jalen. Then, it stepped forward abruptly, looming over him with its blank face, just inches from his. Jalen forced himself to remain still as the Guardian extended a limb that morphed into something resembling a scanner. It hovered over the spot where he had connected with Saras's armor, the skin still faintly marked with circuit-like patterns from the interface. The Guardian made a sound like distant chimes, then stepped back and melted into the wall once more. "What just happened?" Jalen asked, releasing the breath he'd been holding. "It recognized the armor's marking," Saras explained. "You've been upgraded from unanticipated auxiliary to essential support component. A promotion, of sorts." "Still expendable, I assume," Jalen muttered. "Aren't we all?" the Imperial envoy remarked unexpectedly, earning a surprised glance from Saras. They continued through the passage, encountering 2 more Guardians who performed similar inspections before allowing them to pass. The final Guardian was different, larger, and composed of darker material that absorbed light rather than emitting it. "Senior Guardian," Saras whispered, "the last defense before the Ascension Spire." This exchange was longer and clearly more contentious. The Guardian's resonant speech became sharper, almost confrontational, and Saras's responses grew increasingly formal. Finally, the Guardian extended limbs toward all of them simultaneously, engulfing each in a field of energy that tingled uncomfortably across Jalen's skin. When the field retracted, the Guardian split into 5 identical copies, each taking position behind one member of their group. "What's happening?" Commander Varric demanded, hand tightening on his weapon. "Escort protocol," Saras said tensely. "It doesn't trust us completely. Each Guardian will monitor one of us as we enter the spire. Is that normal procedure? The envoy asked, eyeing the Guardian behind him with obvious discomfort. No, Saris admitted. It indicates the security systems have detected the shadow entities attempting to breach the ship. The Guardians are ensuring we are not compromised. A distant rumble shook the passage, and the lights flickered momentarily. That felt like weapons fire, Commander Varric said. We need to move, now. The passage ended at a circular door inscribed with symbols similar to those on Saris's armor. It irised open as they approached, revealing not another corridor, but a vast, open space that seemed impossible given the ship's external dimensions. The Ascension Spire rose before them, a towering structure of crystal and living metal that reached up hundreds of meters to a domed ceiling that somehow showed the stars outside, despite being deep within the ship's hull. Surrounding the base of the spire was a circular platform where a dozen robed figures stood in formation, similar to the Imperial Envoy, but with more elaborate patterns etched into their blue skin. The High Council, Saris murmured, and the High Magistrate. At the center of the council stood the tallest figure, robed in materials that seemed to capture and hold starlight. The face beneath the ceremonial headdress was aged but formidable, with eyes like Saris's, but deeper, somehow containing more dimensions. As they approached, the council members turned as one, expressions ranging from shock to outrage at their unorthodox arrival, accompanied by guardians, no less. What is the meaning of this intrusion? The High Magistrate demanded, voice resonating with authority that made even Commander Varric straighten instinctively. The exile dares to circumvent proper protocols and brings armed outsiders to a sacred ceremony? Before Saris could respond, alarms blared throughout the chamber, and the starfield visible through the dome rippled with distortions. Perimeter breach, announced a mechanical voice. Phase space incursion detected. Unknown entities have penetrated sectors 12 through 37. Security containment failing. The council members shifted uneasily, looking to the High Magistrate for guidance. The Imperial Envoy stepped forward. High Magistrate, I regret to report that the exile's claims appear to be substantiated. The entities described in previous testimony have been detected by ship systems and visually confirmed via the memory node. The High Magistrate's gaze sharpened. You support these claims now, Envoy? After 3 cycles of dismissing them as delusion? I support evidence, the Envoy replied carefully. And I have witnessed concerning phenomena. Another alarm sounded, more urgent than the first. The dome above showed dark patches spreading across the starfield, places where stars simply vanished, replaced by absolute nothingness. We have no time for politics, Saris declared, striding forward to stand directly before the High Magistrate. The shadow entities are here. The memory node is active, and this vessel contains the only warning system capable of alerting all worlds in the sector. I require reinstatement as sovereign to activate the royal override. The High Magistrate's expression remained impassive. The terms of exile were clear. Saris, only unanimous council approval can reverse the decree, and only after the prescribed period of reflection. Which we do not have, Saris countered, gesturing to the spreading darkness above. Those are not sensor malfunctions or optical illusions. They are phase space ruptures caused by entities that destroyed our homeworld, and will do the same to every inhabited planet in this sector, if not stopped immediately. The council members murmured among themselves, clearly divided. The guardians that had escorted them remained motionless, but vigilant, their featureless faces tilted toward the darkening dome. Jalen, who had been silent throughout the exchange, suddenly noticed something alarming. The bioluminescent patterns that ran throughout the ship, along corridors, within the jungle, across the very walls of this chamber, were changing. The steady blue glow was developing patches of darkness, spreading like infection. Saris, he called urgently. The living architecture, it's being affected. Saris turned, eyes widening at the spreading corruption. The shadow entities are attempting to compromise the ship's systems through the bioluminescent network. If they succeed, all defenses will fail. Commander Varric activated his comm unit. "Bridge, status report." When only static answered, he turned to his soldiers. "Establish a defensive perimeter. Standard phase shift protocols." As the soldiers moved to comply, one of them suddenly froze mid-step. His armor, the same deep blue with silver accents as the others, began to darken, black veins spreading across its surface. Before anyone could react, the soldier convulsed violently, then straightened with movements that were suddenly wrong, too fluid, too precise. "Compromise detected," intoned the soldier in a voice that was no longer human. "Assimilation proceeding." Commander Varric didn't hesitate. His weapon discharged, striking the compromised soldier directly in the chest. Instead of falling, the figure merely rippled, the armor absorbing the energy blast completely. Primitive defense, the thing that had been a soldier said. Inefficient. It moved with impossible speed, crossing the distance to the nearest council member in a blur. Before anyone could intervene, it had placed a hand on the councilor's face. The blue skin immediately darkened, black veins spreading rapidly as the councilor screamed. A sound that cut off abruptly as his eyes went completely black. "Two acquired," the compromised entities announced in unison. "Proceeding." "Phase shields!" Saris shouted, the silver armor suddenly emitting a field of energy that surrounded their immediate group. The Guardians responded instantly, forming a secondary barrier around the remaining council members and the High Magistrate. "The Royal Override," Saris urged, turning to the High Magistrate. "It will purge all compromised systems and activate the warning network. We need unanimous approval now." The High Magistrate looked from the spreading darkness above to the two compromised figures, now advancing methodically toward the barriers. For the first time, uncertainty showed in those ancient eyes. "The prescribed rituals," the Magistrate began, "are meaningless if we all die," Saris interrupted. "High Magistrate, I was right 3 cycles ago, and I am right now. The shadows are here, and only sovereign authority can activate the full defense protocols." Another alarm blared, and sections of the chamber walls began to darken, the corruption spreading rapidly through the living architecture. "Time is up," Commander Varric stated bluntly. "Make your decision, Magistrate." The High Magistrate drew themselves up to full height, ancient dignity reasserting itself. "The Council will vote, as tradition demands." The remaining council members looked at each other, then at the advancing corrupted figures, now joined by a third, as another section of wall liquefied and reformed into a shadow-infested guardian. One by one, they nodded their assent, some reluctantly, others with obvious relief that action would finally be taken. When the last councillor had signaled agreement, the High Magistrate turned to Saris. "The exile is rescinded. Sovereign authority is recognized." The formal words carried weight beyond their simple meaning, and Saris's armor responded immediately, the silver brightening to an almost blinding intensity. "Access the Ascension Matrix," the High Magistrate instructed, gesturing to the crystal spire. "Complete the restoration sequence." Saris moved toward the spire but then hesitated, turning back to Jalen. "I require the technical support component." It took Jalen a moment to realize Saris meant him. "Me? What can I do?" "The Matrix requires both royal authorization and technical implementation," Saras explained quickly. "Your neural pattern, imprinted by the armor and recognized by the Guardians, is needed to complete the sequence." The phase shields flickered as another section of wall succumbed to the shadow corruption. The compromised figures had been joined by 2 more and were systematically testing the barriers, searching for weaknesses. "Go," Commander Varric ordered Jalen. "We'll hold them here as long as possible." With no time to argue, Jalen followed Saris to the base of the crystal spire. Up close, he could see that what had appeared solid was actually composed of millions of interlocking crystalline components, each containing what looked like frozen lightning, energy suspended in perfect stasis. Saris placed both hands against the crystal surface, which responded by liquefying around them, drawing their arms into the structure up to the elbows. "Place your hands beside mine," Saris instructed. "The spire will recognize the armor's imprint and draw you in." Jalen hesitated only briefly before placing his palms against the crystal. As predicted, it softened and enveloped his hands, the sensation cool but not unpleasant, like dipping into liquid light. Immediately, his mind was flooded with information, technical schematics, activation sequences, warning protocols, all downloading directly into his consciousness. He understood without being told that his role was to implement what Saris would authorize, a division of power built into the system itself. "I see it," he said, surprised by how calm his voice sounded. "The warning network. It's beautiful." Through the technical interface, he could visualize the complete system, a vast web of quantum-entangled nodes scattered throughout the sector, each capable of detecting phase-space disruptions and alerting nearby worlds. The network had been dormant for decades, waiting for royal activation. "Begin the sequence," Saris directed, voice strained with effort. "I am establishing sovereign authentication now." Jalen focused on the implementation pathways revealed in his mind, directing energy through the correct channels, opening dormant systems, bringing the ancient technology fully online for the first time in generations. It was the most complex technical task he had ever attempted. Yet somehow, it felt natural, as if the skills he had developed repairing simple armor had been preparing him for exactly this moment. Behind them, the phase shields flickered again as the corrupted figures redoubled their assault. One of the guardians suddenly convulsed, darkness spreading through its bioluminescent form. "Hurry!" Commander Varric called. "We're losing containment." The crystal spire began to pulse with increasing intensity, energy flowing up from its base toward the dome above. Jalen could feel the system responding, ancient machinery awakening throughout the ship and beyond, signals propagating outward at faster-than-light speeds to distant nodes. "Almost there," Saris murmured, more to the system than to Jalen. "Accept sovereign authority and activate." The final authentication sequence required simultaneous input, royal authorization from Saris, and technical implementation from Jalen. As they completed the intricate pattern together, the entire spire suddenly blazed with light so intense that Jalen had to close his eyes. When he opened them again, the crystal had changed, now pulsing with energy that flowed not just upward, but outward, spreading through the chamber and beyond. Where this energy touched the shadow corruption, the darkness receded, burned away like morning mist before sunlight. The compromised figures screamed, a sound that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, as the purging energy washed over them. One by one, they collapsed, the shadows driven from their hosts, leaving unconscious but uncorrupted forms behind. Above them, the dome showed the stars returning as the phase space ruptures were forced closed by the activated warning network. Throughout the ship, the bioluminescent systems returned to their natural blue glow, purged of infection. The crystal released their hands, and Jalen staggered back, exhausted but exhilarated. "It worked!" "The immediate threat is contained," Saris confirmed, the silver armor now pulsing in perfect synchronization with the crystal spire. "And the warning network is active across the sector. Any world with reception capability will receive alert protocols and defense parameters." The High Magistrate approached, inclining their head slightly, a gesture of profound respect from one who had stood unbending before the crisis. "Sovereign Saris, the Council acknowledges the wisdom of your foresight and the correctness of your actions." "3 cycles too late," Saris replied, not bothering to hide the bitterness. "How many worlds were lost while the Council deliberated and doubted?" That cannot be changed, the magistrate said. But the future remains to be determined. The council awaits your command. Saris turned to survey the chamber, the recovering council members, the unconscious but saved victims of shadow corruption. Commander Varric and his remaining soldier standing vigilant despite clear exhaustion. And Jalen, still trying to process everything that had happened since he reported for his shift in Bay 47. My first command is this, Saris announced, voice carrying the full weight of restored authority. The traditions that blinded us to genuine threats are hereby suspended. The Council will reconvene not to preserve protocol, but to prepare for war. Because while we have closed this incursion, the shadows now know we can detect them. They will return in greater numbers. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared object. The High Magistrate simply nodded. It shall be as you command, Sovereign. Commander Varric, Saris continued, your ship and crew have unknowingly carried our salvation for decades. I require formal alliance between your fleet and the remaining Nexus forces. Together, we might withstand what comes next. Varric straightened. I can convey your request to my superiors. Sovereign, given the evidence we've witnessed, I believe they will see the tactical advantage in such an alliance. Good. Saris turned finally to Jalen, those clouded glass eyes softening slightly. And as for you, Armatech. Let me guess, Jalen said with a tired smile. Indefinitely reassigned? If you are willing, Saris replied. The warning network requires ongoing maintenance, and there are very few with your particular skills and neural compatibility. Before Jalen could respond, the ship's communication system crackled to life, a human voice cutting through the aftermath of crisis. Attention all personnel. This is Acting Captain Maris. We have experienced ship-wide systems anomalies which are now stabilizing. All section chiefs report status immediately. Engineering teams stand by for emergency protocols. Commander Varric activated his comm. Bridge, this is Commander Varric. Situation contained. Prepare for diplomatic briefing upon my return. Authorization level Alpha. Understood, Commander, came the reply. Standing by. In the hours that followed, the chamber transformed from crisis center to diplomatic headquarters. The recovered council members, chastened by their near destruction, accepted Saris's authority with new respect. The High Magistrate, though still formal, showed a flexibility that suggested genuine change rather than mere political expediency. Commander Varric coordinated with the ship's officers, establishing secure communications and arranging for medical treatment of those affected by the shadow corruption. The compromised soldier and council members were recovering slowly, with no memory of their brief possession but showing no lasting harm. Throughout it all, Jalen found himself in the strange position of technical advisor to both human and Nexus authorities, explaining ship systems to Saris's people and translating Nexus technology concepts for the human engineers. His Level 2 Armatech certification seemed laughably inadequate now. Yet the skills that had allowed him to repair Saris's armor proved surprisingly adaptable to these more complex systems. As activity finally began to slow, Saris approached him again. The silver armor had been fully restored to its original glory, the intricate circuits now glowing with steady, confident energy. The first diplomatic meetings will begin tomorrow, Saris said. The formal alliance will take time to establish, but the immediate crisis has created motivation for cooperation. That's good, Jalen replied, suddenly aware of how exhausted he felt. How many hours had passed since he'd reported for his shift? It felt like days. Though I'm not sure how much help I'll be with diplomacy. I'm just a repair tech who helped activate an ancient warning system and save countless lives, Saris pointed out. But I understand your hesitation. This is far beyond what you expected when you were assigned to repair my armor. Jalen smiled wryly. Just a bit. Saris seemed to consider something, then gestured toward a small door that had appeared in the chamber wall. Come. There is one more place I would show you before you decide whether to accept reassignment. Curious, despite his fatigue, Jalen followed Saris through the door, into a passage that sloped gently upward. Unlike the maintenance corridors with their bioluminescent technology, this passage appeared almost conventional, simple metal walls with subdued lighting. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere few outsiders have seen," Saris replied. "Something preserved from the first nexus, maintained through all our wanderings." The passage ended at another door. This one crafted from what appeared to be actual wood, a startling contrast to the advanced technology that surrounded them. Saris pressed a hand against it, and it swung open silently. Beyond lay a garden. Not the alien bioluminescent jungle they had passed through earlier, but an open space beneath what appeared to be actual sky. Careful pathways wound between beds of plants that resembled earth flowers, but with subtle differences in structure and coloration. A small stream trickled over artfully arranged stones, and the air carried the scent of growing things. Not the synthetic approximation Jalen had detected earlier, but the real, living fragrance of a genuine ecosystem. "How is this possible?" Jalen asked, stepping into the garden with wonder. "We're still inside the ship, aren't we?" "Yes and no," Saris explained, following him onto the path. "This space exists partially in phase shift, connected to a preserved fragment of the first nexus. It is a memory-given form, you might say, a piece of home that travels with us." Looking up, Jalen could see that what appeared to be sky was actually an incredibly detailed projection, or perhaps something more complex, a window into another place that no longer fully existed. "It's beautiful," he said simply. "And private," Saris added, reaching up to release the clasps of the silver helmet. "Royal privilege only." For the first time, Jalen saw Saris's full face as the helmet came away. The blue-tinted skin was smoother than he had expected, with subtle patterns, similar to those of the council members but less pronounced. The clouded glass eyes were set in a face that managed to be both alien and unexpectedly expressive, currently showing a weariness that matched his own. "You're younger than I thought," Jalen observed without thinking. Saris's mouth curved in what was definitely a smile. "By Nexus standards, I am barely of age to rule," which was another objection the council raised to my warnings. Too young, too impulsive, too willing to break with tradition. They walked in companionable silence for a while, following the path as it wound through the garden. Eventually, they came to a small clearing with stone benches arranged around a pool of water, so still it perfectly reflected the projected sky above. "I come here to think," Saris said, settling onto one of the benches. "To remember what we're fighting to preserve." Jalen sat nearby, suddenly aware that he was having a private conversation with alien royalty in a garden that shouldn't exist. His life had become decidedly more complicated since reporting for his shift in Bay 47. "So," he said after a comfortable silence, "indefinite reassignment. What exactly would that entail?" "Initially, maintaining the warning network interfaces on this vessel," Saris replied. "Eventually, perhaps, helping to adapt the technology for broader implementation across allied worlds." A pause. "It would mean leaving your current position, possibly this ship, eventually." "I was counting down to shore leave," Jalen admitted. 27 days. Had it all planned out, cheap hotel, cheaper drinks, no responsibilities for 2 glorious weeks. And now? Jalen looked around at the impossible garden, thinking about everything he had experienced in the past hours. The silver armor with its living circuits, the memory node showing worlds he'd never imagined, the shadow entities that threatened all inhabited planets, the warning network that might be the difference between survival and extinction. "Now I'm thinking my skill set might be more useful elsewhere," he said finally. "Though I'll need better tools than a plasma torch that requires tapping against my thigh to work properly." Saris laughed, an unexpectedly musical sound. "I believe that can be arranged, Armatech. Just Jalen is fine," he said. "Especially if we're going to be working together." "Jalen, then." Sarah's nodded, then looked up at the projected sky with an expression that mixed determination with something like hope. "We have much work ahead of us." "So I gathered." Jalen followed Sarah's gaze upward. "But at least the view's nice." Above them, stars shone clearly once more, no longer obscured by shadow, at least for now. Tomorrow would bring diplomatic meetings and technical challenges, the beginning of an alliance formed in crisis, and the preparations for a conflict unlike any humanity had faced before. But for this moment, in a garden that shouldn't exist, a plasma welder who had simply wanted to finish his shift sat beside an exiled queen who had finally been vindicated. Both of them watching the stars, with new understanding of what moved in the darkness between them, and new determination to face it together.